Get ready for Star Wars. Wait, what should I say? Get ready for Star Wars, the book review. Get ready for Star Wars, the book review. So today I'm wearing my R2-D2 shirt, and yes, it's Christmas and it's like a Christmas sweater, but it's the only Star Wars thing I had, so don't judge. And also, it's kind of hard to, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I've kind of got these earrings that remind me of moon eclipses, so what? That's my cat. What? Leave me alone. Okay, so I was at the library looking for a book called The Bourne Identity, written by Robert Ludlum, and I randomly found this book, which is obviously, you know, in a similar section because it's George Lucas and Robert Ludlum Lucas. Anyway, I was like, I've never seen this thing before, Star Wars From the Adventures of Luke Skywalker, and it immediately caught my eye because it's, the, you know, A New Hope, and it's a book, and I thought I really want to try reading this book. Hang on. What? So I don't know where my cat is. I also don't know if I'm still in focus, but we're going to keep moving forward with this book review. So it's got a prologue, and it says, Another Galaxy, Another Time, and it kind of talks about from the Journal of the Wills or something like that, like it's some kind of other book or story. So I'm really curious about that. I'm going to look into it a little bit more and see what that all is, just because this book says 1976 on its copyright date. And it says by the Star Wars Corporation, and it says photographs for special insert furnished by 20th Century Fox. So it seems like it's, like I can't figure out when it was written versus when it was published in relation to when the first movie came out. So it's just this total mystery of a book, and I was so curious to read it. And so the whole book, it's not exactly a thick book, and it really did read very quickly. It's only like 180 pages or something like that. The whole book kind of felt pretty quick, and it kind of reminded me, just reading through it, that the whole story or the whole film is kind of these three major parts, you know, Tatooine, the Death Star, and then the final battle. It really does go over pretty much everything. It doesn't leave anything out. It was pretty interesting reading the book with my knowledge of the film. The film was kind of filling in the gaps in my imagination, and I was picturing the scenes. I was also reading the dialogue in the voices of the actors, and you can kind of picture the scene itself. So that was a very interesting take on reading the book. Obviously, I'm going to watch the film after this to compare. It was very interesting reading this book with the knowledge of the film that I already have. There's a few differences. I noticed there's actually kind of a scene that's more violent than in the film. It talks about like bone crunching or something. It has to do with Darth Vader and, you know, choking somebody out. So that was very amusing. It's kind of dramatic at times, like the writing is a little bit like poetic sounding, and it's, you know, just a little more romantic than some kind of a astro sci-fi flick. Interestingly, the character Leia was a little bit different. I remember her being kind of like a leader in the movies, but in the book she's a little bit more of a leader, and she's a little bit more harsh, I think, actually. So they brought out some traits and impressions from her perspective that you don't really get in the film, and it was very interesting to see her as a character in the book. Jabba the Hutt was also mentioned, of course, and they describe him, but they don't describe him necessarily as the big blubbery thing. They also don't describe him as a human. I think originally he was written as a human, but they leave it completely ambiguous in the book, so they just have him in there. So it kind of makes me wonder what happened with that. There's a lot of random and pretty amusing language throughout the book, just a lot of stuff that I think was kind of dated for the time, and even the illustration on the front seems like it's a little bit older. And it kind of just amusing thing is at one point Luke says, "What's a duck?" I was like, I realized living on Tatooine he might not know what a duck is, so it kind of makes sense. There's a phrase when somebody says a mite frightening, like the word mite means a tiny bit, you know? It's just really charming and cute. They also use the word oldster to describe Obi-Wan Kenobi multiple times, actually, which I thought was awesome because, you know, just thinking about Alec Guinness, I'm like, yeah, that fits. Also, Tarkin's description. I have to read Tarkin's description. It was just so funny, and the way they talked about him was just perfect. I said, a thin, hatchet-faced man with hair and form borrowed from an old broom. and the expression of a quiescent piranha, however you pronounce that word. They call him a whip of a man, and they describe his parchment skull. I think these are really accurate descriptions when I think about Peter Cushing. No offense, rest in peace. Another really funny thing is they mention how the stormtroopers are accurate shooters whenever they're talking about the Jawa situation when they're all dead and they were shot up and everything. And they said something like, this is too precise for it to have been the Sand People. It can only be the Imperial troopers. I got a good chuckle out of that part. Just because I'm a word nerd. I like that. I'm a word nerd. I'm a proud word nerd. Just for me as a writing nerd and somebody who loves words, I really enjoyed certain phrases, like I'm a nerd, so I'm going to read them out loud. But there was one part where they talked about these holes had been his home, the only one he had ever known. They might as well have been throats of small volcanoes now. I was like, that's really cool phrasing, throats of small volcanoes. And then another one was, they described Tarkin and he said, shrugged elaborately. And I'm like, I can just picture this British guy shrugging elaborately. I just thought that was so brilliant, really amusing. Another word I read was obstreperous? What the heck? What is that word? Obstreperous? Obstreperous? I don't know. Where did I find that word? Yup. Obstreperous. Something like that. And they described when Obi-Wan Kenobi was sneaking around, looking for the tractor beam to disengage it. They called him a Fey Wraith, which just sounds really badass, like you're some kind of a ninja, but I don't know what the word Fey means. A couple of really interesting points about the book that I thought were worth mentioning, inconsistent with some of the other things that you might find in the films. They talked a little bit about Luke Skywalker's father, obviously Anakin, Darth Vader. They just said something about him farming, and we all kind of know that backstory now about him being a slave and pod racing and stuff like that, but one character says he thought he should have remained here and minded his farming. So Uncle Owen thought Anakin should have stayed on Tatooine and minded his farming. He just wasn't much of a farmer, he was destined for more. And that's just really interesting, because I wonder if maybe they intended to have him be a farmer or kind of grow up with Owen, or maybe there was a different backstory imagined originally. There's another portion where they talk about lightsabers that I found incredibly interesting. Kenobi is giving the lightsaber to Luke that would belong to Luke's father, and it says, at one time they were widely used, still are in certain galactic quarters. And I'm like, oh gosh, it's just so funny to think about the context of some of the more recent films and how people use these lightsabers like they're just easy. And I think he describes it not as clumsy or random as a blaster. More skill than simple sight was required for its use. So he's kind of making it this exclusive thing that's very special to the Jedi. And I'm not going to go into some of my opinions about some of the more recent films, but it seems like everybody can kind of pick up a lightsaber and just use it like it's some kind of a stick or something like that. So I kind of like Kenobi's definition of it, and the way he describes it is almost this thing to respect and have reverence for. Strider! What? Oh, my cat is being loud. So Kenobi and Luke are having a conversation about the Empire and the Rebels and their goals and everything, and he says, page 67, I wish I knew what Vader was after, which is kind of interesting because I feel like we know what that is in the movies, or at least it felt clear. When Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi are in Kenobi's home and they're discussing a lot of the past and some of the things that are going on now as well, Obi-Wan says, why do I keep losing it? What? 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 I have nothing for you. Come here. So my cat is coming in the room, but I don't know if he's going to come up to me, actually. Moving on, when Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke are hanging out in Obi-Wan's home and they're talking, Obi-Wan Kenobi says, the Jedi Knights were disbanded, disorganized, or dead. There were few to oppose Vader. That kind of makes me think, if they're disbanded and disorganized, they're not necessarily dead. Or maybe I might be misreading it, but if they're disbanded and disorganized, they're somewhere else in the universe, but they're not dead, so there should be still some people left. However, later on in the book, we hear Vader say that Obi-Wan Kenobi is the last of the Jedi and the greatest. So it's almost like some of the more recent films are kind of moot at this point. I don't know. So another interesting thing, towards the end of the film, or the end of the book, whenever they have the battle, the colors of the teams are red and blue, whereas in the film they're red and gold. So Luke is actually blue 5 instead of red 5. I kind of wonder, it's something small, but I just thought it was interesting. Also, probably the best thing about the book is that Chewbacca gets a medal. Hi! Yay, Chewbacca! Does it not bother you? Like, it bothers me a lot that Chewbacca does not get what he deserves. I mean, he's the co-pilot, for crying out loud, and he was part of the mission, and like, they all should have gotten medals if they contributed in some way, not just Luke and Han. So anyway, in the book, Chewie gets his medal. Yes! Also, another random fact is that Wedge Antilles is a teenager. They say he's a teenager. So now I'm like, okay, wait, was he a teenager in the movie? So now I'm definitely gonna watch the film, just, you know, because I'm really on a kick of reading books and then watching the film that the book was made into.
You know, recently I was reading the Harry Potter books, and then I watched the film, and then I read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and I'm watching the old version, which actually has Alec Guinness in it. I also read The Bourne Identity, and I do plan on watching that film and then continue with the series. I don't think the film...
Anyway, I'm getting way off topic. Speaking of tangents and books, I also read as a child this book series that I fell in love with called The Junior Jedi Knights, and later The Young Jedi Knights. And I won't go too much into the details, but essentially they cover the lives of the children of Han and Luke. So it's a totally different storyline. I loved those books when I was a kid. I'm actually trying to find them and read them. They just kind of follow a different path after these, you know, stories. Oh, I have one last bit that I wanted to share. It was on page 69. Something that Obi-Wan Kenobi said in the book really stood out to me. Remember, Luke, the suffering of one man is the suffering of all. Distances are irrelevant to injustice. If not stopped soon enough, evil eventually reaches out to engulf all men, whether they have opposed it or ignored it. And I just thought that was really poignant and really powerful to read, because it was true then and it's true now, and it's true in a variety of different ways. And it just goes beyond the scope of, you know, a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. This was a darling book. I just thought it was so cute and charming. I'm really glad I found it. So I encourage you, go support your library. I'm really glad that I went to the library looking for another book and I came home with this one as well. Get into reading. I just find something that you like. You know, it took me a while to kind of get back to fiction, because for the last couple of years I've been reading nonfiction and kind of more academic books. I've been really enjoying getting back into types of books that I used to read as a kid, and I encourage you to do the same and find yourself something you like. Thanks for watching this video. I've got a lot of other different types. I am testing out this format of speaking at the end of the video. I have some music, I have some more travelogues, I have a lot of random things. I try to keep myself accountable by writing out some goals and making a video about it and kind of tracking my progress along the year. So anyway, enough babbling. I'll see you next time.